Hank Pym is awesome. It is not a sentence you hear a lot, but it is true. Hank Pym is awesome. He's such a fascinating character and will always be one of my favorite Marvel characters. Hank Pym is a person who has failed so many times and made so many mistakes, yet he constantly tries to do better. He has given up so many times, but somehow always manages to find the strength to pick himself up again and give it another go. That is such a deeply relatable concept for anyone. There is so much to love about Hank Pym as a character if you actually read his stories. I have always considered Hank Pym to be one of the most interesting Marvel characters to ever exist. He is a founding Avenger, and that means something. Hank Pym is a man who has crippling self doubt, and in his earlier days, he always felt like he had to compare himself with the people around him. When you're on a team like the Avengers, it is no surprise that Hank felt insecure despite being an incredibly capable person himself. What makes him so endearing to me is how he always manages to pull through despite doubting himself. He always rises to the occasion. In the very first Avengers story, it was not Thor or Iron Man or the Hulk or the Wasp who saved the day. It was Hank's ingenuity that helped them defeat Loki and form the Avengers. That is who Hank is, the guy who always pulls through no matter what. Another characteristic of Hank that I've always found interesting is his willingness to give second chances to everybody around him. Hank has always been a flawed hero who has made some horrible mistakes. Because of that, he understands that people are more than their worst moments, and it instilled in him a relentless belief in second chances. That is why he was able to inspire both Scott Lang and Eric O'Grady to become Ant-Man and heroes, despite Scott starting off as a thief and Eric starting off as a manipulative pervert. Hank has learned over the years that you do not have to define yourself by your worst mistakes, even if others do. That is why he has this almost naive self belief that everybody can step up and be better if given a second chance. This is a man who invited Loki to join the Avengers. Everybody laughed at him, only to be proven wrong later when Loki sacrificed himself to save the world. Nobody else would have thought to do what he did, and that is such an interesting aspect of Hank to me. The most criminally underrated aspect of Hank Pym has always been his struggle with mental health. Hank Pym has bipolar disorder. I do not think that is surprising to anyone who has read his stories over the years. It is something Marvel took too long to confirm, but they finally did in the Avengers AI series about a decade ago. That is the true story of Hank Pym as far as I'm concerned. A man struggling with mental health issues whose own pride and inferiority complex forced him to avoid dealing with it until it was too late and he had made some horrible mistakes. That's the story people should be talking about. Instead, it was twisted into something Hank never was and never has been. I genuinely do not understand how anybody can read the original story, and I mean actually read the story, and come away thinking that he is a horrible monster. While not explicitly stated in some cases, it is clear that the original Yellow Jacket story and all subsequent Hank stories are about a man who had an inferiority complex and suffered a severe nervous breakdown. A man who struggles with mood shifts as a result of his bipolar disorder. You can see when he has his euphoric manic episodes and his low depressive episodes. That is not something you see often in superhero stories, but it is real and something many people struggle with. That is what the real conversation about Hank Pym should be. It is strange how people always say mental health matters but cannot seem to handle it in fiction. Many people fail to understand that those struggling with bipolar disorder or similar illnesses might sometimes do terrible things that are not a true reflection of who they are as people. The fact that Hank has been demonized for his illness in stories about superheroes who are supposed to inspire compassion is absurd. I believe Hank Pym's finest moment as a character came when he created Avengers Academy and served as headmaster for a group of at-risk young superhumans. These young people were tortured by Norman Osborn and were considered to be at risk of becoming supervillains. But Hank created Avengers Academy in an effort to guide them and help nudge them towards a better path. Hank was magnificent in his role as an educator. He was kind and patient and extremely protective of his students. It allowed him to thrive in a way that being a superhero or even a scientist never did. For a man who never wanted to bring kids into his life because of his mental health issues, he was remarkably wonderful at serving as a father figure. Being the headmaster of Avengers Academy was Hank's zenith as a character, and I will always rue the fact that it came to an unceremonious end before Marvel completely abandoned it. If you ask me, that should be Hank's permanent role. Part time superhero, full time educator, it suits him perfectly. There are two things that always come up when Hank Pym is mentioned: Ultron and the infamous slap. I did not want to focus too much on those because I think there is so much more to Hank than those two moments, which is why I saved them for last. People often claim that the slap ruined Hank Pym, but I do not think it did. It certainly contributed to an undeserved negative public perception, but it also made him a more complex and interesting character. His mistake and breakdown became part of his story, and watching him move forward from it has led to many compelling stories. You cannot stop someone who has never read a Hank Pym story and only watched a short video or saw a random post on some social media website from calling Hank Pym a wife beater. Anyone who has actually read Hank Pym and his stories knows better. Aside from maybe the original Ultimate Hank Pym, there is no Hank Pym story that explicitly makes him out to be a monster who deliberately found pleasure or power in hitting his partner. So I will never understand why so many people choose to be willfully ignorant and continue to propagate this false belief about the character. I suppose it makes for a better hook for videos and conversations. The superhero is a wife beater is hardly more glamorous than saying the superhero struggles with mental health and has made mistakes because of it. I do not think Hank Pym is a ruined character, and I do not think he ever was. The proof is in his stories from the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s. All anybody needs to change their mind about Hank Pym is to read his stories. You might even end up a fan just like me. If Marvel were not so hesitant, they would have put in the effort to reshape the narrative a long time ago. You cannot change the past, but you can absolutely change how it is framed and discussed. Hank Pym is not a problematic character who needs to be hidden away or retired. He is a character who can open up important conversations. He has 60 years of history. He is a founding Avenger. He has inspired countless heroes within the Marvel Universe and readers who have taken the time to understand him. You cannot control the internet, but you can change the conversation over time. The Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes animated series handled Hank Pym as a character exceptionally well. It was a show aimed at younger audiences, yet it still embraced the complexity of his character. Did that create controversy? Did people protest or complain? Not at all. Most people loved it and look back at it with fondness. That is how you shift perception and gradually reshape the narrative, not by ignoring the past or erasing it. Hank Pym is a character with immense storytelling potential, and it is a shame that Marvel has sidelined him in recent years. I hope that changes soon.